Gen X feels alone in marriage, and most of them don't know why. They have a partner, they share a home, they built a life together. From the outside, everything looks stable, responsible, functional. And yet, underneath that stability, there is a quiet sense of emotional absence. Not chaos, not betrayal, not constant conflict, just distance. A subtle emotional gap that doesn't get named, doesn't get argued about, and slowly becomes part of everyday life. For Gen X, loneliness in marriage rarely looks dramatic. It looks calm. It looks controlled. It looks fine. You talk about logistics, schedules, bills, responsibilities. Who's doing what needs fixing, what needs planning. But you don't talk about what's happening inside. Not because you don't care, but because you were never taught how. You learned early that emotions complicate things, that feelings slow people down, that needing reassurance creates discomfort. So, you learned to manage instead of express, and you brought that skill into marriage. Many Gen X grew up in households where adults were overwhelmed, stressed, emotionally unavailable. Love may have existed, but emotional safety didn't. There wasn't space for big feelings. There wasn't patience for vulnerability. There wasn't guidance for emotional expression. What there was instead was expectation. Be strong, be independent, don't complain, don't need too much. And Gen X listened. They adapted. They learned how to stay out of the way, how to handle things alone, how to regulate themselves without emotional support. That adaptation became identity. So, by the time Gen X entered relationships, they already knew how to function without emotional closeness. In marriage, this shows up as reliability without openness. You show up, you contribute, you don't disappear, but you stay emotionally guarded. You might be a good listener, you might be practical and supportive, you might solve problems efficiently. But when the conversation turns inward, when it asks for vulnerability instead of solutions, something in you shuts down. Not because you don't love your partner, but because you don't feel safe being emotionally exposed. Gen X learned how to give support, not how to receive it. Receiving care feels uncomfortable, sometimes even suspicious. When someone offers emotional closeness, it can feel intrusive rather than comforting. So, you minimize, you deflect, you say you're fine. And over time, marriage becomes a place of cooperation instead of connection. Two people sharing space, history, and responsibility, but rarely sharing their inner world. This doesn't come from lack of love, it comes from lack of emotional training. Gen X was never taught emotional language, only emotional control. You learned how to contain yourself, how to manage your reactions, how to stay composed. So, instead of saying, "I feel lonely," you say, "I'm tired." Instead of saying, "I need reassurance," you say, "It's not a big deal." Instead of saying, "I'm afraid of getting close," you withdraw. Quietly, automatically. And because nothing explodes, no one notices. The relationship doesn't fall apart, it just slowly thins out emotionally. And that's how loneliness enters marriage. Not loudly, not suddenly, but through silence. Marriage didn't create this distance. It revealed it. Marriage didn't make Gen X emotionally distant. It exposed what was already there. When life is busy, distance hides easily. Work fills the space. Routines distract. Responsibilities create purpose. But when things slow down, when the kids grow older, when the noise fades, when the structure is already built, What remains is the emotional foundation you were formed on. And for many in Gen X, that foundation is survival. You learned early how to stay composed, how to stay functional, how to stay in control. You learned that emotional expression was risky, unpredictable, often unwelcome. So you learned to suppress instead of express, to manage instead of reveal, to endure instead of explore. Those skills worked. They helped you build a life, a career, a family, a reputation for reliability. But they didn't teach you how to be emotionally present. So when marriage asks for vulnerability, real vulnerability, not competence, you don't know what to do with it. Not because you don't want closeness, but because closeness was never modeled as safe. You were taught that love meant provision, consistency, responsibility, not emotional attunement, not softness, not being held when you fall apart. So you give what you know. You show loyalty, you stay, you do your part, but emotionally, you remain slightly out of reach. Your partner might feel it. They might sense that something is missing, but struggle to explain what. They might say things like, "I feel like you're here, but not really here. I don't know what you're feeling. I wish we were closer." And those moments feel confusing to you, because from your perspective, you are there. You're not leaving. You're not abandoning anyone. You're doing exactly what you were taught to do. Gen X was trained to equate stability with love. So when emotional closeness is requested, it can feel unfamiliar, even threatening. Not consciously, not intentionally, but somewhere in your nervous system, a message appears. Don't need too much. Don't make things complicated. Don't rely on anyone. So instead of opening up, you close down. Instead of sharing uncertainty, you offer solutions. Instead of expressing vulnerability, you offer logic. Instead of asking for comfort, you stay silent. Over time, this creates emotional parallel lives. Two people who care deeply for each other, but don't fully know each other. Two people sharing space, history, and responsibility, but not emotional depth. This is where loneliness grows, not because of lack of love, but because of lack of emotional safety. Gen X wasn't taught how to feel safely with another person. You were taught how to handle things alone. So even inside marriage, you remain internally self-reliant. And self-reliance, when taken too far, becomes isolation. You weren't cold. You weren't broken. You adapted to an environment that didn't make room for emotional needs. That adaptation kept you functional, but it also kept you distant. Now, years later, you feel the cost. Not in dramatic arguments, not in explosive breakdowns, in the quiet. In the moments where you feel unseen but don't know how to explain why. In the sense that something important never fully arrived. In the feeling that you did everything right and still feel emotionally alone. And that realization can be deeply unsettling because it raises a question Gen X rarely asks themselves. What did I need back then that I never got? And even harder one, what parts of myself did I shut down to survive? Marriage didn't cause this pain, it revealed it. And once it's revealed, it can't be unseen. So the real question isn't why your marriage feels distant.
The question is this: when did you learn that closeness wasn't safe? And more importantly, do you still need that belief today?
If this resonates, you're not alone. And if you've never heard this explained this way before, that's because Gen X was taught to carry things quietly. If you want to continue this conversation, share your experience in the comments. Not advice, not solutions, just recognition. And if this content speaks to something you've lived, subscribe, not for motivation, but for understanding.